Once again, I see some people standing up in the balcony. If they would like to sit down, please don't bring any chairs into the room. If they would like to sit down and watch, we're going to lower the lights in the social hall, and it will be focused on the television screen. Would you ask him to lower the lights in the social hall, please? It's a very large screen, and you can see everything and hear everything.
Ask for Cohen, whatever.
Yeah, he's right here.
I want to tell the people they should please go into the other room. They should no room for standing.
Once again, ladies and gentlemen, once again, those of you who are standing, we have seats in the social hall, and we have, there's still some seats, and we have a full large 6-foot television screen, and you can watch everything that's going on in here, right behind you in the social hall. Please do not stand in the aisles. Thank you very much. One second, Rabbi. One second. Rabbis, honorable members of the dais, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Shaare Zion. I am David Cohen, the president of the congregation. I would like to ask everyone to stand for the national anthem that will be sung by Cohen. Hi.
That's all right. Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight for the ramparts we've watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rockets' red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave?
Please remain standing. Cantor Fahi will sing the Jewish song of hope, the Hatikvah.
Kol on balibat benima nefesh Yehudi homiya v'nefesh mizrach kadima ayin lezion Sophia. Od lo avda tikvat בארצנו ארץ ציון וירושלים.
Please remain standing. We would like everybody to remain standing for the invocation by our chief rabbi of our community, Jacob Kasson.
שם אדוני נעשה ונצליח, עזרי ועם אדוני עושה שמיים וארץ. I'm talking in Hebrew to Almighty God because this is language of Almighty God, and to pray for the salvation and benefit of our brothers in Syria. صفات عام למען אחינו בני ישראל הנמצאים בארץ סוריה, אלוהינו ואלוהי אבותינו, שמע קולנו. Language of Hebrew is language of God, so I am talking to God for the benefit of our brothers. עץ שרה ליעקב ומנה ושע. זה קראנו כנס גדול בעטרת בבית אלוהינו. אספנו כל הקהילות חדשות, ראשים, זקנים, נשים וטף, רבנים, מנהיגי קהילות, ובינינו אנשים נכבדים המייצגים הממשלה והשלטונות של העיר ניו יורק. עטרה זו היא למען אחינו ושרינו. עשרה זו למען אחינו ושרינו, שארית הפריטה הנמצאים בארץ סוריה, הנמצאים בסרה ומצוקה, ולא נתנו להם רשות יציאה. מלפני חודש ימים שמענו על בשורה לא טובה, על רציחת אישה ובניה, השם ינקום את דמם. אספת קהילות ישראל זו היא מחאה נגד מעשי הרצח, שפיכות דם נקיים בארץ סוריה. ובו בזמן אנו מפצירים בכל תוקף מהשלטונות של סוריה לפתח את שעריה ולתת רשות אפשרות לכל יהודי ויהודייה שרוצים לצאת מארצם, להעניק להם החופש הדרור ללכת באשר יבחרו. אנו מתפללים, מתחננים לפני אבינו שבשמיים, ראה בעוני עמך ישראל, כמו שנאמר, בכל צרתם לא אוצר, ומלאך פניו הושיעם, באהבתו וחמלתו גאלם, ונתנם ונשאם כעולמי העולם. ונאמר, ואף גם זאת, בהיותם בארץ אויביהם, לא מאסתים, לא גאלתי מחלותם, להפר בריתי איתם, כי אני אדוני אלוהיהם. ונאמר, ישב אדוני אלוהיך, ישבו אותך ברחמך, ישב בחפצך מכל העמים, שאין ביצרך אדוניך שמה, אם יהיה דעך בקצה שמיים, ושם יקבצך אדוני אלוהיך, ומשם יקחך, אלוהינו שבשמיים. תן את חן העם בעיני השלטונות הממשלה בארץ סוריה, לאמור, שלח עמי ויעבדוני. ואנו תפילה, כשם שהוצאת את אבותינו ממצרים, כן תגאל את אחינו הנמצאים בארץ סוריה בפרט, כל שאר הארצות בכלל. ובעתיד הקרוב נזכה כולנו לגאולת עם ישראל השלמה, לביאת משיח צדקנו ובניין בית קודשנו ותפארתנו במהרה בימינו, ואמרו
אמן. Where is he? Let him come over. Come.
Okay, bring him. Take
We need another
this
chair.
one. I'll get it.
All right. No. I'll sit over
So
there.
I'll bring you a chair.
Yeah.
No. Steve, I have another seat. I have it. Steve, please, I want you to do something.
Stay here, I said.
Would you sit here? Would you like talking?
I prefer to sit.
Please.
Just leave it. Yes. Okay. All right.
Bonnie. Sit down,
We're truly honored that we have with us, who just came in from Jerusalem, the Chief Rabbi of Jerusalem, who will be visiting with us on this coming Saturday, Harav Shalom Mishash. Welcome. Shalom. On behalf of the Executive Committee and the officers of this congregation, the largest Sephardic congregation in the world, and the mother congregation of the Syrian Sephardic communities in the United States, I would like to thank you all for coming this evening to participate with us and show solidarity in this important event. It is my distinct pleasure to introduce to you the chairman for this evening, who did so much to put this rally together, the Rabbi of Shaare Zion congregation, Rabbi Abraham Hecht.
My distinguished colleagues, rabbis, our distinguished guests from Yerushalayim, Harav HaGaon, Rabbi Shalom Mishash, distinguished members of the Senate and the Congress and of the city and local governments, ladies and gentlemen, Bruchim Habayim B'Shem Hashem. Blessed are all of you who have come in the name of God. We welcome all of you to this important rally for Syrian Jewry. The theme for this rally perhaps can be found in the story of Joseph and his brethren. When his father Jacob tells Joseph, "Elech na re'eh et shlom achecha v'et shlom hatzon," go, please, seek out the welfare and the peace of your brethren and their possessions. And Joseph goes, and he looks, and he can't find them. And the pasuk says, "Yimtzeu ish," a man found him. The rabbis tell us this was a malach, Gabriel. V'nei toeh b'sadeh. He's bewildered, he's lost. He don't know what he can do for his brethren. V'yishaleu ish, the man asks him, "Ma tavakesh?" What are you looking for? Vayom, and he said, "Et achai anochi mavakesh." I seek my brethren. This community, ever since it started some 80 years ago, has never forgotten the country from which they came, namely Syria. People in this community never forgot their brethren, always sent them money and clothes, brought them over here to be reunited with their relatives and friends, started them off in business, did whatever they could, went to visit them, and tried to keep the bridge open so that the very first newcomers to these shores weren't selfish with a newfound haven, but brought over their brothers and their sisters, their family and their friends. And that is how this community, thank God, has grown and prospered. Ever since the State of Israel was proclaimed some 35 years ago, all of this stopped. Not because the people in our community stopped caring. They cared even more and became even more concerned. But there descended an iron curtain, and nobody was allowed to leave. And all of a sudden, our brethren in Syria became hostages. Nobody left. It is only during the last few years that a trickle, were allowed to come out. The old, the sick, those in need of medical help. And even then, only after they posted a very large sum of money and left their children and members of their immediate family as hostages. What inspired this meeting tonight, my friends, was the tragic and the barbarous murder of a lovely young woman, a pregnant woman, with her two lovely children. Many tears have been shed, and much anxiety has been felt, and deep grief has engulfed this community. We painfully remember these Kedoshim, and we feel for the Anthem and the Abadi families in their moment of tragedy. And memorial meetings have been held for them throughout the world. And tonight, we mention their names in reverence and in humility. And we pray that their souls will intercede on behalf of the families who remain in Syria, and that their prayers will be heard by Almighty God to release and to redeem those who remain. The latter-day prophet Malachi, speaking about the end of days, says, "Az nidru yirei Hashem ish el re'ehu." There will come a time when God-fearing people will gather together and speak to each other. Vayakshev Hashem ve'yishma. Almighty God will listen and pay attention. Vayikatev sefer zikaron lefanav liyirei Hashem lechoshvei shmo. It will be inscribed in the book of remembrance for those who fear Him and those who love Him. Every one of you who have come here tonight, not only the distinguished dignitaries who have all sacrificed a great deal of time and effort, but every one of you who has come here this evening can be included amongst those who are Yirei Hashem v'choshvei shmo, those who fear and love God, and those who are very much concerned that God's name be not profaned by terrible barbarous acts against His people. I hope and pray that Vayakshev Hashem, that Almighty God is listening, Vayishma, and that He will hear our pleas and our prayers. Vayikatev v'sefer zikaron lefanav, that it be inscribed that the time has come, that the Jews in Syria cease their suffering, and that the Jews of Syria be allowed to emigrate, that those who remain be granted every right, every humanitarian right, every protection as good citizens of that country, and that protection be provided for them against these terrible terroristic acts, and that when they are allowed to come to these shores, our government will see fit to grant them political asylum. These are the things that we hope and we pray for. And I am sure that with the united effort that all of us tonight are showing, the solidarity with our brethren will give them courage, will give them the strength, will give them the determination to continue to pray to God that the authorities in Syria will recognize the needs, the humanitarian needs of relocating these people and reuniting them with their relatives and their friends in the free world. And that in the very near future, through the intervention of our own great United States, we will merit to see hundreds and perhaps thousands of our brethren being permitted to emigrate and be reunited with their families here in these United States. Amen. Ladies and gentlemen, when we conceived having this kind of a rally, the very first name that came to our minds as a champion of human rights, as a distinguished man of letters, as a man who is known throughout the world for his fearlessness and courage to say what has to be said, a man of conviction, a man of vision and leadership, one of the most outstanding Americans of this generation, and for us, we are proud to say, a very good friend of our own community. In these United States, it is a custom that when you introduce the President of the United States, you don't say too much about him, but you just mention and say, the President of the United States. I don't know whether the next speaker will someday be. I wouldn't mind. But it gives me great pleasure to introduce to you a man who really needs no introduction, because he is known all over the world. I now present to you the United States Senator Patrick Moynihan. If you ran for office today, it'll be a smashing victory. God bless you.
Shalom. Rabbi Hecht, Your Excellency, the Grand Rabbi, Rabbi Kassim, Mr. Khan, when Ralph Towell called my wife Elizabeth to tell of the horror that had occurred in Aleppo, and asked if I would come and speak to you tonight. I was in Jerusalem, as it happened, and spoke to her that evening, and I said I had not known of this matter. I said, of course I would come. And in the days since, thinking of the event and thinking what to say to you, and counseling with my friends and colleagues in the Congress, Chairman Solars, and my dear friend Representative Schumer, it has seemed to me that there were three things to be said to the world and to ourselves. The first is this: that in the face of such great sorrow of death, there is yet the affirmation of life. Here we are, the other side of the world from the place where a loving mother and her child were murdered. And we are gathered in sorrow and protest and affirmation. She and her husband and her child and her unborn child are not alone in the world. People are not forgotten. They are remembered. The hostages of Syria, if I remember your correct pronunciation correctly, are part of us. They are not disconnected. We are one human life on earth, and while any of us is hostage, all of us is concerned, and we bear witness to that here tonight. That is a great and an affirming thing. The second thought I would have for you is that we are not here to threaten anyone else. We are here to affirm life and to ask justice. We speak not from the power of our nation, but from the truth of our convictions. What happened in Aleppo is sacrilege, is unacceptable, by the standards of the world, by our standards, and those involved must know it. We ask that the Jewish people of Syria be free. We ask that they be free as we are, as we would hope all the world would be. We ask it out of the sense of the truth of that affirmation that God has given freedom to his children and expects of nations that they will allow it, that they will permit it, that they will, if they are wise, celebrate it. We are not here to threaten, but neither are we here to plead. The government of Syria must know that it has offended the standards of nations and the rights of peoples everywhere, and that there can be consequences to this too. I have just come from the Middle East. I have been aboard our ships of war there. The carrier Independence, the carrier Guam, the battleship New Jersey. I have been ashore with our forces there. The Marine Battalion landing team. I've seen the French and the Italians, the British there too. The world is saying something about that part of the world. And we would wish to be modulated, but we would wish to be understood. This is not the first time our nation has been called upon and has felt itself called upon to speak to these matters. It is not the first time that the Jews of Syria have found themselves the subject of outrage and the object of concern. In 1840, in Damascus, there was a massacre occurred. Martin Van Buren of New York, then President of the United States, instructed our ambassador then in Istanbul to raise the issue with the government there. And the British sent a warship to the area. In 1903, in Kishinev, Jews were slaughtered. And Theodore Roosevelt, President of the United States and a New Yorker, took the most severe action. He recalled the American ambassador from the Sublime Port, as it was then called. And again, the world responded. In some sense, small events of the 19th and early 20th centuries, we had not hardened ourselves to the horror of this age. And yet the people involved should know that we have not forgotten that capacity for concern. We do not threaten, but we do state that if it should come to a test of will and resources, surely the powers in Damascus must know how overwhelmingly they are overbalanced. And that when a United States Senator and 2 United States Congressmen come to a congregation to speak to such matters, we do not do in the spirit of threat or violence, but we do it with resoluteness even so. Chairman Solars introduced and passed in the United States Congress a resolution asking the United States to concern itself with the ability of the Jewish citizenry of Syria to emigrate, and it was unanimously adopted. Charles Schumer has introduced such a resolution in the House this year. I shall introduce it in the Senate tomorrow. It will be adopted. We want everyone to know of our goodwill, but we do not wish anyone to doubt our determination. We will see this issue out. These people will not be forgotten. They will not be forsaken. We stand with them here in New York. We stand with them around the world. We will stand with them until they are free. You are glorious. God bless you.
Thank you so very much, our beloved Senator. Just a few days ago, one of the most important citizens of Brooklyn, New York, perhaps the #1 citizen, won a smashing political victory which was applauded by everybody who knows him. We all love him. We all respect him. We all admire him. He is a true friend of all the Jewish people. He's a true friend of the borough of Brooklyn, all the citizens. But he has a very warm spot for our community. He's been here several times. He has spoken to us. We visit with him very often. He is most cooperative. He's one of the sweetest people I have ever met. I want to give you the #1 citizen of Brooklyn, New York, our borough president, Howard Golden.
Chief Rabbi Kassin, Rabbi Heck, worthy rabbis, my colleagues in government on the dais and in the audience, distinguished guests and friends. I am here as an outraged government official. I am here as an outraged Jew. I am here as just a person who was outraged. And I'm here today to join with my brothers and sisters who feel the tragedy which befell these families in Syria. For once again, the theme of this evening, You Are Next, applies not only to the people of Syria, singled out for tragedy, not just to the Jewish community in Syria, but it applies to each and every Jew the world over. It is for this reason that I am pleased to deliver this proclamation in the name of the Governor of the State of New York. State of New York Executive Chamber. The Jews in Syria, numbering some 4,000 souls, have been living in constant fear, experiencing discrimination, and deprived of their basic and elemental rights as citizens of their country have been subjected to acts of violence and terrorism and denied the universally recognized right to emigrate. A community-wide rally is being organized in support of their human rights on Tuesday, January 31st, 1984. Now, therefore, I, Mario M. Cuomo, Governor of the State of New York, do hereby proclaim January 31, 1984 as Save Syrian Jewry Day in New York State, and I join with the Syrian Jewish community of New York and with all citizens of the State of New York in requesting unrestricted emigration of Syrian Jews to countries of their choice and the protection of the security, safety, and human rights of those Jews who choose to remain in Syria. I appeal to President Hafez Assad of Syria to meet these humanitarian requests on behalf of Syrian Jews. Given under my hand and the Privy Seal of the State of the Capitol in the city of Albany this 26th day of January in the year 1984, and it's signed Mario M. Cuomo, Governor.
The borough president had another engagement, and he has to leave right now. We thank him very, very much. Give him a big hand.
Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, I want you to know that this was a real sacrifice for him. He had a speaking engagement. I don't know what the other people are going to do when he comes in 2 hours late. But he is a lovely, wonderful, good friend, and he stayed, and we really appreciate it. Let's give him another hand so he'll remember it. My dear friends, I want you to know that our most distinguished and beloved senator couldn't just leave Washington and come here. In fact, we chartered a plane and brought him and 2 most distinguished congressmen. And they'll have to be leaving right away because the plane is waiting, and I'm sure I apologize on their behalf. It wasn't their fault. National Airport kept them sitting there for an extra hour. Otherwise, they would have been on time. I thank you for your indulgence and understanding. When I first heard this terrible tragedy, the very first person I turned to was our congressman. He wasn't in the States. He was away on one of his fact-finding trips where he accumulates much data, which he then uses in his very important Foreign Relations Committee, of which he is a ranking member. But we lost no time, and within 12 hours, he called me from Brasilia, and we had a long discussion. What can and should be done? He immediately dispatched a letter to the president, after which he sent out feelers and got in touch with our State Department, and he registered our outrage at what has happened. And ever since that time, he's been traveling, but he's been in constant contact with our community, doing a beautiful job. I know that many of us here have had occasion to use his good offices. Many people who have come from overseas have been helped to be able to remain in these states because of his intervention. He represents our community with great pride, and we are very proud of him. It is now my pleasure to present to you our beloved Congressman, Stephen Solars.
Chief Rabbi of Jerusalem, Chief Rabbi Kassin of our own community, Rabbi Hecht, Abe Dweck, who in his capacity as chairman of the Committee to Save Soviet Jewry, was the very first person to bring the plight of the Jewish community in Syria to my personal attention just after I was elected to the Congress of the United States 10 years ago. My dear, dear friend, Steve Shaare, who perhaps more so than any other person has been in the forefront of the fight to help this beleaguered community. And with whom I traveled to Syria on a mission of mercy on behalf of the Jewish community in that country several years ago. And of course, so many of my other good friends from the community who have worked closely with me over the course of the last decade in the effort to help the beleaguered Jewish community in Syria. In the face of this terrible tragedy, in the face of this dastardly deed, one hardly knows what to say. When I first learned what had happened, as Rabbi Hecht indicated, I called both him and Steve Shalom from Brazil, where I was then on a fact-finding mission for the Foreign Affairs Committee, in order to get the benefit of their advice about what I might do to be helpful under the circumstances that existed at the time. As Rabbi Hecht indicated, I immediately sent a letter to President Reagan, calling upon him to make it clear to the government of Syria that we would take into account how they treated the Jewish community in their country as we determined how best to deal with them in the days ahead. And because they both felt that it would be reassuring to the Jewish community in Syria if there could be some public expression of concern on the part of our own administration, I also called the Assistant Secretary of State for the Near East, Mr. Richard Murphy, who some of you may know was our ambassador to Syria and who worked very closely with us over the course of the last several years in our efforts on behalf of the community in that country. And I asked Secretary Murphy if there was some way in which we could put on the public record, if only as a way of letting the 4,000 Jews who remain in Syria know that the United States government was concerned about their fate, some record of our concern in this regard. I received just the other day the following letter from him. Dear Congressman Solars, I refer to our telephone conversation on the question of the tragic murder of the wife and children of Mr. Victor Abadi in Aleppo, Syria. I want to assure you that the United States government has been concerned about this tragedy since the news first reached Washington in late December. We have conveyed our concern to the authorities of the Syrian government. We understand that Syrian authorities have provided police protection to 2 families in the Aleppo Jewish community who have received threatening phone calls since the murders. Police protection for the community as a whole reportedly has been enhanced. We will remain alert to do what is within the limits of our possibilities on this issue. Just the other day, I also received a call from the Office of Refugee Programs in the Department of State. My office had been working closely with them on behalf of the Antebbe family, whose application for political asylum in our country had been turned down a few years ago. And they told me that in light of recent developments in Syria, that I should inform the Antebbe family that they were in no danger of deportation and that the administration would not deport any Syrian Jew here in the United States back to Syria. Lest the same fate which befell the Abadi family befall them. When I first learned about this tragic event, I had a terrible sense of déjà vu. This is, unfortunately, an old story in Syria. It was, after all, only a decade ago that 4 young Jewish women from Syria were brutally raped and murdered. And when the whole world first became aware of the plight and problem of the Jewish community in that country, just a few months later, at Abe Dweck's request, I undertook my first of 3 missions to Syria. I met with President Assad and prevailed upon him to let our people go on humanitarian grounds. not necessarily to Israel, but at the very least here to the United States, where they could be reunited with their families in our own country. I wish I had been more persuasive, because in response to my pleas, he was utterly unrelenting. I feel a very personal sense of loss, because this is a community with which I have a very close personal association. I've worshiped with them in their synagogues in Damascus. I've visited with them in their homes. I've spoken with them in their shops. I know, believe me, I know the fear and tension under which they live. I know, believe me, I know how deeply they yearn to be free and how desperately they desire to leave Syria. I have absolutely no doubt that if the day ever comes when the Syrian government at long last gives them permission to go, their departure from Syria will be so quick it will make the exodus from Egypt over 3,000 years ago look leisurely by comparison. But what can we do to help? It isn't as if we haven't tried. Senator Moynihan was good enough to refer to the resolution I introduced, which was passed by the Congress unanimously 5 years ago, which called upon the government of Syria on humanitarian grounds to live up to its obligations under the Universal Declaration of Human Rights and permit the Jewish community of Syria to leave for other lands. The consequence of which was that very few Jews were permitted to leave Syria, but I can no longer get in, since as a result of having sponsored that resolution, the Syrian authorities will no longer issue me a visa. And yet, we cannot stop. We must not forget. We have a moral obligation not only to identify with the plight of this community, but to do everything within our power to prevail upon the Syrian government to let them go, and to remind our Jewish brethren in Syria that they have not been forgotten. It isn't simply a question of whether they will be given permission to depart tomorrow. It's also a question of whether they will know they have not been abandoned. Their morale depends to a very large extent on the sense of solidarity which we manifest with them tonight. And who knows what might happen in the future. It took, after all, 10 plagues before the old Pharaoh relented, and who knows but that sooner or later even the modern Pharaoh, Hafiz al-Assad of Syria, may relent as well and permit our people to leave. So I pledge to you tonight that I will continue to do everything I can to prevail upon our own government to make this issue a matter of the highest priority in our dealings with the Syrian government and with my colleagues in the Congress, Senator Moynihan, Congressman Schumer, and others who have likewise manifested a concern in this issue, to make it clear to the government of Syria that how they treat the Jewish community in their country will determine how we treat them. Thank you.
At this time, Senator Moynihan and Congressman Solaz will be leaving. We'll give you a very nice flight home. We also want to thank the men in blue, Captain Wood, and the police department. We would like to thank the police department for the great job they're doing, and Captain Wood in particular. Thank you very much. I'd just like to, for a moment, would like to thank all the rabbis of the various communities which have helped us put together this program. The Ahiezer congregation of Ocean Parkway and Avenue X, the Beth Torah congregation of Ocean Parkway, the B'nai Yosef congregation of Avenue P. What's my voice? Call Israel of Bedford Avenue, the Deal congregation in Deal, New Jersey, the Great Neck Synagogue, and the Deal congregation brought groups here. We thank them very much. Atere Torah, the West Deal Synagogue, the Long Branch Synagogue, the Magen David Yeshiva, the Ahiezer Yeshiva, and the Sephardic High School. We'd also, thank you. I hope it's kosher. The American Jewish Committee, who's done a terrific job helping us all this week, Rabbi Mark Tannenbaum, the director, and Dr. George Gruen, who's here with us, and their staff. Mr. David Schwartz, of the executive director of the Sephardic Community Center, did a fantastic job. We can't forget. Oh, you got the water. Thank you very much. And especially one gentleman, which we all very proud of, Mr. Stephen Shalom, who conceived, prepared, and paid for the ad in today's New York Times. Thank you very much. Mr. Malcolm Holine, the director of the Jewish Community Relations. Rabbi Jacob, there's two Hecks. Rabbi Jacob Heck, the brother of Rabbi Heck, who was on radio station WEVD. And the Ahava congregation of Ocean Parkway, which we forgot. Just two more. Mrs. Shifra Hoffman, for granting interviews with Rabbi Hecht and others on WLYN. She did a terrific interview, if those of you who have listened. Rabbi Jacob Spivak for interviewing Rabbi Hecht on his radio program. At this time, we've received a message from Senator Alphonse D. D'Amato. He was unable to be here today, and he wrote this letter to Rabbi Hecht. Dear Rabbi Hecht, the shocking display of brutality and barbarism witnessed in the unconscionable slaying of a young mother and her two children in a Jewish home in Aleppo underscores the conditions of fear and terror that Syrian Jews are presently living under. Those who attempt to characterize the present Syrian regime as humanitarian and charitable are either woefully naive or terribly blind to the constant and brutal violation of human rights. The deaths of Mrs. Abadi and her two children serve as a grim reminder that religious freedom is still a fragile and precious treasure on our globe, and one that must be protected through the actions such as yours. Sincerely, Alphonse D. Amato, United States Senator. Now, Rabbi Hecht.
Thank you very much, Dave. Our next speaker is a man who has been dedicated to the finances of the city of New York for many, many years. And if we have a balanced budget and we are in the black, I think we have to give him much of the credit because he knows how to take care of books. Most of our people here are businessmen, and they know how important it is to have somebody who knows what's going on. Our next speaker is not only a brilliant mathematician and one who knows how to take care of the finances, yours and mine, and of almost 10 million people in the city of New York, but he is personally a very traditional Jew, comes from a rabbinic family, and is involved in every and any issue which has to do with the Jewish people. He's a leader in the work for the rescue of Soviet Jewry, and whenever anybody is in a position where he's persecuted or oppressed, you will always see him in the forefront doing whatever he can. He is indeed a credit to the Jewish people. It is my privilege to present to you now Mr. J. Harrison Golden, the Comptroller of the City of New York.
Maradiatra, Birshut Harav HaChashuv, Harav Avraham Hecht, Rav Harashi Yerushalayim, Rav Harashi Shel HaKihila, Morai v'Rabotai, ladies and gentlemen. We are met tonight in what is truly a religious act. It might not at first blush seem to be a moment of Jewish affirmation, but our tradition teaches that fundamentally it is. In his Hilchot Panasat Aniyim, in his protocols on the support of the poor, the Rambam wrote, Pidyon Shvuyim Kodem Lefanasat Aniyim. The freeing of those who are unjustly enslaved takes precedence even over the high value of the support of the poor. And so tonight, all of us in this room, not just the Syrian community, but the Jewish community at large, is affirming that Kol Yisrael Arevim Ze Lazeh, that every Jew has an abiding responsibility as a function of his birthright for the welfare of every other, and that we will not be silent until the Syrian Jewish community is free. Our meeting is also reminiscent of a central verse which we are taught in Bereshit. We are told in the book of Genesis that when Cain slew his brother Abel, God said to the murderer, Kol demei achicha soakim elai min ha'adamah. The voice of your brother's blood cries out to me in anguish from the depths of the ground. The blood, the innocent blood of Jews that was spilled in Syria is heard by us. It is unrequited, and we will insist that it be heard in the Council of Nations, that it be heard around the world. And so tonight, we gather in this shul. We gather primarily as Jews whose antecedents are in the Syrian community, but as a large and vocal and vital Jewish community to call upon our own government to act justly and to use its power, its suasion, and its might to free this enslaved community. And we say to Assad, Yamach Shemo V'Zichro, we say to Assad, Shalach et Amenu, let our people go.
Thank you very much, Mr. Golden. For a very inspiring address. We are indeed very fortunate in the city of New York that we have such wonderful children of our own people representing us in the halls of Congress, in the city government, in the city council, and also in every section of government. It takes a young man with traditional learning and knowledge to be able to present such a beautiful talk. Our next guest is another one about whom we can all be very proud. As you know, our neighborhood has been divided into different sections. And whereas we had one congressman representing us, like an amoeba, it has split in two, and we now have two congressmen representing our community. If you ask me, I believe that we are such an important congregation and community that we can have three representing us in the Congress. But in all seriousness, our next speaker, who has just been elected to Congress and virtually a newcomer, has already established for himself a record which is enviable. He is a most concerned citizen, very much interested in the needs of our community, and very much concerned about the needs of our people everywhere. We look forward in the years to come to seeing this young man make a tremendous and a lasting mark, not only on American politics, but also in the Jewish community. I am very proud and happy to present to you our next speaker, who too left in the middle of a session of Congress at great personal sacrifice, and who said, I must be here, and who did arrange to have a news conference with the family, with the Abadi family, which was covered quite well in the press, and where he made a very strong and impressionable statement. It is now my pleasure to present to you Congressman Charles Schumer.
Thank you, Rabbi Hecht, and distinguished rabbis, rabbonim, my colleagues in government, and of course you, the assembled people here. First, I should explain, probably some people are wondering, why am I here and Senator Moynihan and Congressman Solars went back to Washington? It's explained by one difference. Their wives live in Washington, and my wife lives in New York. So while I was flying back here, I can have an extra night with my beloved wife. So I'm glad to be here and be able to stay and spend the evening with you, and then spend the night with her. Ladies and gentlemen, We are here because of a specific event and a general event. The specific event, of course, was the brutal massacre of the Abadi family. You know the details, but I think we must keep remembering them. A wife was brutally murdered and then mutilated. 2 young children, again, not only murdered, but mutilated. And when I spoke to Harry Abadi, the brother-in-law and uncle of the deceased, and he showed me the 2 pictures of those beautiful young boys, a boy and a girl, an impression was seared in me and impelled me to say, we must do everything we can to see that this doesn't happen again. And immediately after, this brutal murder, there were calls that evening to others in the Syrian community in Aleppo, warning them that the same would happen to them. This was not a robbery or a burglary, as some had reported, and even our State Department had at one point wished to believe. This was a brutal murder that could not have occurred with, at the very least, the government's acquiescence, and at the very worst, their complicity. Because we all know that that community is watched like hawks. Assad's secret police are everywhere. And nothing could have happened without their permission. And we are here for a general reason as well. Our general reason is the 5,000 or 4,500 Syrian Jews who are not allowed to emigrate. Is this the first instance of what has happened? No. Mrs. Abadi herself, 3 years ago, was made to bear herself before the Syrian secret police because she might have had documents of all absurd things from the Muslim Brotherhood hidden in her body, and then she was raped by those police. There are other instances. We all hear, we heard from one of the presidential candidates, who I am ashamed to say is a member of my party, that there is a great humanitarian leading Syria. If this man was such a humanitarian, would he not let Chaim Victor Abadi emigrate? If this man was such a humanitarian, would he not let other families emigrate? We all know of the terrible situation of the Barakat family. A mother who was shot trying to escape is here with a husband and 2 of her children. But Mr. Assad, the great humanitarian, keeps 2 of her children in Syria and doesn't even let them join the family. Some humanitarian is this. Senator Moynihan announced the resolution that I am introducing into the Congress. Congressman Solars had introduced the previous resolution. Senator Moynihan 5 years ago. Senator Moynihan and I are introducing the same resolution again, or an updated version of it. Because, as we say, we must continue the pressure. The resolution reads, it's H.R. 246. It reads, Whereas the Syrian government has forbidden all members of the Syrian Jewish community to emigrate. Whereas the approximately 4,500 Jews living in Syria have been victims of a systematic anti-Jewish program, which has included severe restrictions on travel, loss of right to hold government jobs, law requiring that all Jews bear special identification cards, and restrictions on Jewish rights of inheritance. And whereas the unexplained murders of a young Syrian Jewish woman and her children portend a renewed pattern of violence against the Jews in Syria, now therefore be it resolved that the House of Representatives and the Senate concurring that the President of Syria should immediately permit all members of the Syrian Jewish community to emigrate from Syria. I have spoken to Speaker O'Neill today. Because of the urgency of the situation, this resolution will be placed quickly on the calendar, and we expect it to pass. Senator Moynihan, as I mentioned, and as he mentioned, is introducing the resolution tomorrow. You may say, will this resolution guarantee the exit of our bereaved and threatened kinsmen? It will not. But like the waters of the Colorado River that ran through northern Arizona, drip by drip and drop by drop, they created a Grand Canyon. Every move we make, every motion we take is another drip against the hard rock facade of President Assad and his Syrian regime. We will not stop. We will never stop. We will continue until the gates are opened and every family that wishes to emigrate is allowed to. Ladies and gentlemen, when we began this evening's proceedings, we sang two anthems. They are symbolic of our purpose here tonight. We first proudly sang the Star-Spangled Banner. The Star-Spangled Banner is a symbol of America, as is the assembled audience here tonight, most of whom came to this country, they or their ancestors, less than 50 years ago. And today, they are one of the most prosperous and successful and well-regarded communities in the entire country. The Syrian community here in Brooklyn and in the United States is the American dream, and it is a dream that we want all of our Syrian brethren to be able to share. The second song, anthem, we sang tonight was the Hatikva Hope. That is what we leave with, hope. As Jews, for more than 3,000 years, we have been hoping and hoping and hoping. We will continue to hope. We will continue to pray that our brethren be released. And we know, as long as there is fire in our breasts, that in Aleppo and in Damascus, as well as here in Brooklyn, Am Yisroel Chai, the people Israel live.
Thank you very much, Chuck. I would just like at this moment to recognize the office of the mayor, send Mr. Isaac Heimowitz to represent Mayor Koch. Bernard C. Waxman, Assistant Counsel. For Carol Bellamy, the President of the Council, is here with us. our own councilman, Mr. Noah Deere, whom we all like. I left out somebody before. Megan David of Scarsdale is with us here, and we want to thank them also for participating. I have a message here from the Attorney General, Robert Abrams, with reference to the rally here. Dear friends, I very much regret that prior to a commitment to speak at the Humanitarian Awards Dinner in the American Jewish Committee on Long Island will keep me from being with you at the special memorial meeting for Lillian, Joseph, and Sandy Abadi. I do want to join you, however, in expressing first the grief we share with Chaim Victor Abadi over the tragic loss of his beloved wife and beautiful young children. And second, our outrage at the brutality and bigotry of these despicable crimes. The murder of the Abadis places on all of us, more than ever before, the burden to continue the effort in every arena to win the freedom to immigrate for these 5,000 of our Syrian brothers and sisters. Moreover, as American and as beneficiaries of a free society, we bear a special responsibility to work to build a movement for human rights around the world, so that no other Chaim Abadi in Syria or anywhere else will lose his family. Robert Abrams, Attorney General for the State of New York. I have two other messages. We've received many, but we pulled out those messages that we felt should be brought to your attention. This one is from the Commission of Social Justice by the Order of Sons of Italy in America in Washington, D.C., in which, I won't read the entire message, in which they share with us the plight of the Syrian Jews. It's a 3-page message and really a very beautiful message, with which we thank them very much. And I also have, most ironically, a message from a councilman in the city of Philadelphia, a Syrian Christian by the name of Councilman James J. Tayoun, in which he passed a resolution with reference, in which he says, resolved by the Council of the City of Philadelphia that we hereby repudiate the brutal atrocity committed against the Syrian Jewish community with the recent murder and mutilation of Lillian Abadi and her 2 children in Aleppo, and call upon Syrian President Hafez el-Assad to permit Syrian Jews to freely immigrate to join their families in the United States and other Western democracies. That the engrossed copy of this resolution be presented to the American Jewish Committee, evidencing the sincere sentiments of this legislative body of the City of Philadelphia, Councilman James J. Tayoun. Thank you. Rabbi Heck. One second. You gotta forget. I can't forget my leader and my co-leader. The district leader in this area, which has been a tremendous help to us. Anytime we have a problem in the community, the first one we go to is the district leader, like you go to the doctor right away. Mr. Herb Lufka and his co-leader, Mary Tobin. Is she here? Where is she? Thank you very much, Mary. Thank you. Rabbi Heck.
Our program is coming to an end. We have only 2 more speakers. I want to thank you very much for your kind indulgence, for the beautiful deportment, for the interest, for the concern, for the warm feeling that you have evidenced here tonight. Our next speaker is a young man who has been in the New York Senate for quite a number of years. And when he heard about this meeting tonight, he said, I must be here, and I must tell you what I'm doing to try to register in the New York State Senate the feeling that we all have at this time about this brutal incident which took place in Syria. He is a very good friend of our community, and whenever we need anything in which he can be of help, he immediately responds. It is my pleasure to present to you now State Senator Donald Halperin for a few words.
Thank you. I can't say that I flew in from Washington, but I did drive down from Albany. And also, unlike an amoeba, at the same time that that you were broken up into 2 congressional districts, you were put into 1 Senate district.
Yeah.
So, I know it's been a long evening, and I wish that I could match the eloquence that we've heard here tonight. But perhaps I can just share with you one thought. Not too long from now, many Jews and others will, and I know they're already preparing, to remember the Holocaust on Yom HaShoah. And as a person who was not alive at that time, I often wonder, what were the thoughts of my parents, of my grandparents, of the Jewish community, of the world at large, when they started to hear the first stories, the first rumblings of what would become the Holocaust? When did they begin to believe the unbelievable? And I try to, in my own mind, think now, when do we begin to believe what we hope will never occur? And how do we arouse the minds of people who are bombarded on the media with so many stories? It's not an easy task. We've heard tonight about many efforts, and I would just like to announce that I have introduced in the Senate today, the Senate of New York State, a resolution which calls upon the President of Syria to permit those Jews to leave who want to leave, and urges Congress and the President of the United States to take the action that's necessary so that we will never have to see what we saw about 40 years ago. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Senator Halperin. It's quite obvious that the outpouring of good sentiment and good feeling by people throughout these United States should be a source of great inspiration and encouragement to our brethren in Syria, and especially to all of us here who are so vitally concerned about their plight. We are not alone. There are so many great men and women